A few years ago, I rented a room inside the same duplex my brother Neil lived in. I was between jobs, and it made sense. I've always been close with him, and honestly, I liked having him around. He had the front unit, and I took the back. Nothing fancy, but it worked. Felt like a safe place to land for a while. The first couple nights were normal. I was still settling into the back room, so I spent a bit of time in the front with my brother, shared meals, helped out with groceries, and spent most of my day job hunting online. But by the end of the week, I started feeling weird, like I was being watched. Not constantly, just here and there, mostly at night. I'd catch myself glancing down the hallway for no reason. The place wasn't big, but that hallway always felt a little darker than it should have been. Like the shadows didn't settle right. One night, I was up late scrolling through listings when I heard something shift behind me. Not loud, just the soft creak of a floorboard, like someone had stepped into the living room. I turned around, expecting to see my brother, but no one was there. I brushed it off, figured the place just made noises. But a few minutes later, I felt it again, that weird heaviness, like the air had suddenly thickened, like the kind of silence that listens back. I told myself I was just tired, turned off the light, tried to sleep. That's when I saw a shadowy figure. The first thing I noticed was that it didn't look anything like Neil. It looked more like a woman with pale skin, standing at the end of the hallway, barefoot, wearing what looked like a white nightgown, old and worn. Her head was tilted slightly, like she couldn't quite figure out what she was looking at. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there. I froze, thought maybe I was dreaming. Then she took a step forward. I sat up fast, and just like that, she vanished, like she had never been there. I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning I asked my brother if he'd ever seen anything weird in the house. He looked at me for a long second and said, "You saw her too?" Then he laughed it off, like it was a joke. But his eyes didn't match the laugh. I moved out a week later. Didn't even bother asking for my deposit back. Back when I was doing long-haul deliveries, I used to cover a lot of back roads between Texas and New Mexico. Most of my deliveries were around that area, but every now and then I'd get sent farther out. Places like Oklahoma, Arkansas, even Tennessee, if the job paid well enough. I wasn't in a big rig, just a company box truck, mostly moving auto parts and machine equipment to small-town garages and supply shops. I liked the quiet of it. No dispatch yelling in my ear, just the road and a checklist. This particular trip was one of the longer ones, headed east towards Georgia, so I'd passed through Nashville earlier that night. I took a less familiar route to get to my destination. I was more exhausted than usual. My last appointment had run late, and I didn't leave Nashville until after 2 a.m. I kept nodding off at the wheel, which was dangerous, so I figured I'd pull over and grab some coffee. About halfway between Nashville and Chattanooga, there's not a lot, just woods, hills, and the occasional gas station. But that night, I saw this small diner I'd never noticed before. Old-school neon lights flickering a little, kind of retro-looking, like the type of place that hasn't changed since the 70s. I pulled in, parked under this buzzing light, and stepped inside. It was warm, smelled like coffee and pancakes. There was only one guy behind the counter, probably in his 60s, with white hair slicked back. He looked up and nodded at me like he'd seen me before. There was a young couple sitting in a booth in the back, whispering to each other and laughing softly, and some old music, Patsy Cline or something like that, playing low in the background. I sat at the counter. The man poured me coffee, without asking. It was strong, almost bitter, but exactly what I needed. I asked how long they'd been open. He just smiled and said, "We've always been here." I didn't think much of it. I was just glad to be somewhere warm and safe, to get a break from the road. I drank the coffee, used the bathroom, thanked him, and got back in my truck. The whole thing took maybe 20 minutes. The next morning I told a coworker about the place. She looked confused and asked where exactly I'd seen it. I pulled up the map and pointed out the spot. She squinted at the screen, then shook her head. "There's nothing out there," she said. "I used to drive that stretch every weekend to visit my sister. Not even a gas station, just trees and road." I didn't believe her, so on my next drive back, I looked. Drove slow, stopped even. There was nothing. Just an empty lot surrounded by trees, no diner, not even the flicker of a neon light. To this day, I've never found it again, whatever that place was. It kept me from falling asleep at the wheel that night. Maybe that was the point. This happened to me when I was about 14. My cousin Jeremy had this old property in Missouri. Big, wide stretch of land. It used to be Grandpa's, but a couple years back, he passed it down to Jeremy. Grandpa had moved in with Jeremy's mom not too far away, but he still came by often, like he couldn't quite let go of the place. That summer, my parents were heading out of state for a couple of weeks and asked Grandpa to keep an eye on me. So I stayed out at the property with him and Jeremy. I was excited. I was going to have a great time with Jeremy and Grandpa. There was a red barn sitting on the far end of the land, hadn't been used in years. The paint was all faded and peeling, and the big wooden doors never really shut right. They just swayed a little when the wind came through. You could always hear that creaking from the main house, especially on quiet nights. Grandpa was the quiet type. He wasn't dramatic or superstitious or anything. Just calm, worn in. I think whatever weird stuff had happened out there, he'd either gotten used to it or made peace with it. Normally, I didn't get to see Jeremy all that much. They lived about a 6-hour drive from us, so visits were rare. And somehow, even though that place had been in the family forever, no one ever told me anything about it. Looking back, that kind of bugs me. Like, why didn't anyone mention the creepy barn? Anyway, one afternoon we were out near the barn, tossing a football around. Jeremy threw it a little wide, and it rolled up right to the barn doors. I jogged over to grab it. The air felt different as I got closer, cooler, even though the sun was out. The doors were cracked open, like always. I leaned down to pick up the ball, and that's when I saw him. A tall figure, standing maybe 6 feet inside, half turned, like he'd just noticed me. He wasn't moving. He didn't say anything, just stood there in the dim light. He looked like he was wearing old overalls, maybe a coat. Kind of hard to tell. But what got me was how the light hit everything around him, except him. Like he was there, but not really. I said something. "Hey, you okay?" But nothing. No movement. Not even a breath. Then I blinked and he was gone. Just like that. I grabbed the ball and backed away slowly. Didn't turn around until I was halfway to the house. I didn't want to take my eyes off that doorway. When I told Grandpa about it later, he didn't look surprised at all. Just kind of nodded and said, "Yeah, that barn's got something in it. Always has." I asked him why he still came around so much, and he just chuckled and said, "Place hasn't hurt me yet." Like that was enough reason to stick around. After that, I noticed he started locking the barn doors at dusk. One night, when a storm was blowing in, he even hammered a couple boards across them. Didn't say a word about it. I never went near that barn again. Not even in daylight. Every now and then during a get-together or holiday dinner, someone brings it up, usually as a joke. Some of the family kinda believe it. Most don't. But I do, because I saw it. This happened to my mom back in the 90s, and she only told me about it once. She was traveling for work and stayed overnight at a motel off the highway, somewhere near Flagstaff. It was the kind of quiet place that makes you notice your own breathing. Around 1 a.m., she heard a knock at the door. Not loud, just a soft, kind of polite tapping. She peeked out the peephole and saw this woman. White dress, long dark hair, but her face was kind of angled down so you couldn't see much of it. My mom said she felt an immediate chill, like something was not right. The woman didn't say anything, just stood there, with her hand resting on the door, waiting. She didn't open it, just sat in bed, staring at the door, heart pounding. After a while, the tapping stopped. But when she looked out again, there were wet footprints outside the door, barefoot, leading away down the hallway. The next morning, she mentioned it to the guy at the front desk. He paused, looking at her for a moment like he was deciding whether or not to say something. Then he said, "Ma'am, we don't have any record of someone in a white dress staying here last night, but people do see her from time to time." He went on to say they'd even made a couple reports to the police over the years. Same description, same confusion, but nothing ever came of it. No one could ever figure out who she was or where she went. My mom never stayed there again.